And I am joined by a very distinguished panel of guests out here in a very snowed out American capital. Kirti from Industech, Mr. Mark Linscott from USISPF and the Asia Group, Sanjeev Joshpura from the Indiaspora, and my first comments to our newly joining guest, Mr. Mark Linscott. Please tell me something. Everyone says that the defense and the strategic partnership is the cornerstone or the bedrock, as to say, of this relationship. My own thoughts are slightly different from that, and I believe that the kind of tech that this capital can transfer or actually can marshal to be transferred to Indian shores, and technology is something that we need. We need for upgrading, for the betterment of the life of a very large swath of our population. No other capital can. Would you agree with me, or would you say that it still remains, the defense still remains the centerpiece of this relationship? What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, I lean in your direction as well. I think certainly the broad-based tech sector is the future of the bilateral relationship, and I specifically work on trade, the bilateral trade relationship. So every sector, whether it's goods, agriculture, services, digital services, but I think the tech area is where we're going to see the growth and where the two sides need to work together.
Kirti, again, the same question to you. Technology is something that we need for the betterment of humanity back home. Mr. Modi prides himself in the fact, his administration, that they have pulled out nearly 25 crore people in last one decade out of abject poverty, and that's the new middle class that India now has. Would you also think that the technological prowess of Washington, D.C. is something that we need, and we can actually partner the Americans on that front? It's not just a one-way street.
No, absolutely. You look at most of the platforms that are there, they are powered by engineers that are in India. We've had this great relationship, a symbiotic relationship where US has the innovation, India provides the scale. Or even if you go to Silicon Valley, and I think Sanjeev would be more able to talk about the diaspora over there and the great work they're doing. Most of the companies right now, they have CEOs or so on that have certain sort of Indian origin over there. And I think in trade also, technology trade, services trade, digital trade is really the bedrock of our bilateral trade. And then since we're talking about trade, I also want to mention that I think there's been a lot of talk on tariffs and how the trade relation is going to turn out under this Trump administration. But I think there's an underappreciated fact. The fact that, when we look back to the first Trump administration, for the first time, we came so close to actually inking a sort of US-India mini trade deal or trade deal. So that
whatever name you give it, many people. I was talking to a diplomat yesterday, and I said, would it be a sort of a FTA? And he said, what's in a name? A nomenclature can be anything, but if you can elevate it to a level where the trade of goods and commodities, and in our case services also, flows freely, then that's where we wish to arrive at.
Well, absolutely. In fact, I was the first U.S. negotiator on that mini deal during the first Trump administration related to India's benefits under the Generalized System of Preferences program. And it was going to cover a lot of sectors, but not nearly as much as a free trade agreement, whatever you want to call it. I do think that this time around, and we may see that announcement with the Prime Minister's visit, the two sides will commit to a very substantial trade agreement negotiation, and they will have an ambitious timetable, perhaps by the end of the year. And it will cover goods, it will cover all good sectors, it will cover services, it will cover, I expect, intellectual property rights. It will be wide-ranging. So I'm a real optimist. I see the potential as being huge.
My sense is that probably even the hardcore proponents of some kind of caveating this relationship would not be pessimists, I would say, currently in the state that we are in. But let me ask you a different question, Sanjeev. Let me ask you a question about the diaspora's interests. And Prime Minister has always been a very big champion of the Indian diasporas across the globe. It's not just United States of America, but across the globe. He has interacted freely with them. He has taken the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas and the awards associated with it to the next level. His engagements are, of course, are far more vigorously powered with the diasporas. And you represent diaspora and diasporic interests in the United States of America. What do you think is top of the line agenda when it comes to diaspora, other than, of course, as the relationships grow, become more powerful, become more engaging, become more vigorous, diasporas obviously benefit?
You know, you're absolutely right, Nikunj. At Indiaspora, we represent global diaspora leadership and their connections with leaders in India. So we've seen this engagement by Prime Minister Modi, which is vigorous in a lot of different countries, as you alluded to. Here in the United States during his current visit, it's important to note that we released a report, Indiaspora did, in conjunction with the Boston Consulting Group last year, talking about the the Indian diaspora in the US and their positive impacts on a broad swath of US society and on the US-India corridor. So go beyond the CEOs, go beyond the tech firms. There are 16 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies that are of Indian origin. There are 78 unicorns in America that are founded by Indian origin folks. But go beyond that. There are 6,000 hotels in America. There are 22,000 Indian origin professors in America. So it goes to various facets of the relationship. You look at hotels, restaurants, all of those kinds of things. It goes into so many facets that it's a very broad-based economic driver of the relationship beyond the cultural benefits that the diaspora relationship brings.
Mark, of course, the size of the two economies, since you have a very wide-ranging experience in the trade world as well, the size of the two economies is quite different, you know. A few trillions on our side, a massive American economy on the other side. But this relationship has actually benefited from a two-way street kind of a transaction. This is not a one-way street relationship where India has always taken a backseat as a recipient of the aid or as a recipient only. India has obviously created, you know, as Sanjeev was very valiantly mentioning, you know, created a great deal of wealth in the United States of America, particularly the talent pool, a large talent pool, which is also a national wealth, so to say. So do you think that the time has now come that whether it is under the construct of a free trade agreement or whether it is under any other construct, a more liberal regime can be put in place between India and the United States of America so as to ensure that this flow of services and goods is virtually free. And also, another point that I would wish you to speak on and about is the fact that the whole gamut of this relationship, if it moves out of certain silos like the defense or the technology now being the AI world, and gets into a more diverse and larger plane of free trades, goods, services, etc. Do you think it's more and much beneficial to the populations on both sides, the civilian, large, complete populations on both sides?
Absolutely. And in terms of liberalization, there was a time, certainly early in my career, in which it was negotiations in Geneva, the World Trade Organization, and equal treatment for all. We are well beyond those days. We now have a world in which countries negotiate individually with each other, bilaterally, sometimes regionally, and that's the future. That's the trend in terms of liberalizing trade. And I think we'll have that situation with the Trump administration. He's threatened tariffs. He likely will increase tariffs, but that just gets the two sides, US and India, to the table, to the negotiating table, to actually get to a point where they are offering benefits to each side. It will be beneficial for both sides. And you compare the size of the economies, but I think the bigger picture is that India will soon be the third largest economy in the world. So what is being negotiated for the years ahead is between the largest economy in the world and soon to be the third largest economy. And as Sanjeev pointed out, this is more than about goods crossing borders, services crossing borders. This is about individuals. This is about the peoples of both countries and how they can benefit from this trade relationship.
And I've always maintained that people remain the cornerstone of any relationship. Tech, trade, transfers, goods, free services, all of them come later. My last words, the last words of the discussion to the lady, a brief comment, and then I have to hand it back over to the studios.
Well, I think we'll keep the upward trajectory of the relationship, build on the foundations that Trump in his first administration laid down and Biden sort of continued, be it with ISET, in this X, or even, I'm pretty hopeful on the trade deal as well, especially since India itself has extended a hand by reviewing a lot of the tariffs and custom duties. So I think it's going to be a good ride for the next 4 years.
And my sense, both Maria and Vishnu, after talking to a whole host of people here, people who are closely working with the US administration, is that everyone believes that when you start early, as I was discussing with Sanjeev in my last conversation with him, early bird catches the worm. So when you start early, Prime Minister is here just under a month of the inauguration of the American president, and you have now full 4 years to go. And each of the steps that you need to take, remember, patience is a virtue when it comes to diplomatic ties. Nothing papers over the differences as much as probably patience, hard work, backroom negotiations, and painstaking step-by-step march forward.
Sure.
And all of that, you need time in hand. Time in hand is the biggest possible asset that relationships can have with a mutual agreement at the apex of political leadership.
All right.